Thank you, Claire. Yes, so for the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to talk to you about ab initio pilot nav training under the new military flying training system. As Claire says, my name is Lieutenant Commander Rod Royce. Just a brief history on myself before I launch into the talk. I joined the Navy in 2004, and I initially went off down the fast jet route. I was chopped on the Harrier, ironically on a nav sortie, and then I went back into the rotary system, and I emerged on the Commander Helicopter Force frontline flying the battlefield Lynx, also on exchange with the Army. I have been a qualified flying instructor for 5 years now, and I have the privilege of being the commanding officer of 703 Naval Air Squadron at present, which is the Navy's elementary flying training squadron based at RAF Barkston Heath. So throughout my talk, what I'm going to cover is an overview of EFT, just to give you a bit of flavour and a bit of scene setting. I'm going to discuss the main resources that we have to hand in order to teach our syllabus, and then I'm going to go over the summary of the main nav syllabus. I'm going to discuss a little bit about reversionary nav, which will sort of link back to what you've just been hearing about, and I'm going to discuss GPS nav, which is clearly the present day / future, and finally I'm going to sum up with the training objectives that our students have to meet. So an overview of elementary flying training then. Typically our trainees are between about 19 and 25. 19 is very rare. Sort of early 20s, 25 is probably more typical. And quite often graduates. Their experience, flying experience, ranges from pure ab initios who have never seen or touched an aeroplane before, to those in the Army and the Navy who come to us with grading, so about 13 hours of flying. Some have a PPL, it's fairly rare, and quite a few of the Air Force have been through the University Air Squadron system, and so have a handful of tutor hours. But what they almost all have in common is that they have no prior navigation training. We teach tri-service pilots, and the Navy have to be streamed onward to either fast jet or rotary wing, and the Air Force clearly into the 3 streams, which includes the multi-engine, which you're going to hear a bit more about later. They typically have a couple of years in service, having done officer training and other basic courses when they get to us, and they've all completed our 6-week ground school package that will also be touched on in the next talk, and that covers the sort of the broad brush of nav things such as charts. It covers flight ops, but it doesn't cover any navigation specifics or techniques. And at the moment we train approximately 150 pilots a year, but on the prefect at Cranwell and Barkston Heath. But the aim is that will rise to 250 to cater for the 2015 Defence Review. So the main resources then, well, clearly the instructor is probably one of the most critical resources, but the other 2 I want to discuss, because they're specific to the military flying training system, are the GROB Prefect T-Mark 1 that you can see there on the left. This came into service in 2017. It is probably one of the most thoroughbred elementary flying training aircraft we've ever had. Up front it has a Rolls-Royce turbine putting out 450 horsepower and driving a 5-speed constant speed prop, 5-blade constant speed prop. It's retractable, it's fully glass cockpit, and it has the ability to cruise straight and level at about 210 knots, which means that we can nav at 180 knots ground speed. I don't need to tell you guys that that's 3 miles a minute, which is nice, easy maths for us simple pilot folk. It's, to my mind, not a scratch on the old Chipmunk, but you can't have everything. But it is an incredibly nice aeroplane. Allied to that, we also have synthetics. So on the right, you can see what we call the flight training device. Now, this isn't a simulator. It is bolted to the deck. But what it does have is very good graphics, not wraparound, but very good graphics. The instructor sits at the console and is able to input emergencies, difficult weather, and so on and so forth. And the cockpit is fully functioning, so you can learn navigation in this. It's a very good procedural trainer, but what it doesn't do is replicate the flying characteristics of the aircraft. Therefore, it's not a sim. So the main syllabus then, by the time they get to this stage of the course, they've covered general handling and they've covered instrument flying, and they have about 20 hours. In fact, I think 19 hours airborne, and then some FTD time as well. They take a break from flying to do a 2-day ground school package, and this is bespoke nav stuff. So it teaches them the mission planning system, which is the computer they use for their to draw up their routes to put on the kit in the aircraft, and it teaches them bespoke nav techniques. So how to plan a nav route, but also how then to fly it. After those 2 days, they go into the FTD for a couple of trips to get used to the basic procedures. And then they start at nav 2 in the yellow with a medium level only nav. We fly medium level at 5,000 feet if we can, but you know, if weather dictates, we'll go lower. But 5,000 feet is ideal. So a couple of trips of that, learning other various things like loss procedure, you can see there, weather avoids, and emergency handling. They then take a bit of a break from nav to learn the handling techniques for the low flying system, or low level flying, I should say, which we do at 500 feet above ground level. And then it's mixed profile nav from then on, so medium to low level. And then after a few trips, we introduce the IP to target work, which I'll touch on more in a bit. They do a land away on trip 8, nav 8, and that'll be somewhere that takes them out of their comfort zone and out of the local area. They will typically go to a civilian place to get a different flavour, and we've been using Leeds Bradford quite a lot. Duxford is another popular one, and they're very good to us. Then finally, if there is a final nav test, and I'll come on to more of that later. You can see the starred down the left-hand side is the trips where we introduce the FMS nav, so GPS, and allowing them to use the kit. Flight management system. So they've uploaded the route into the aircraft, and they can then use that to nav. So all in all, it's not many flying hours. You can see it's 6 proper airborne navigation sorties, and then quite a bit in the FTD. So reversionary nav, as you can see, you know, some of you will recognise those two, having flown like this before yourself. So the half-mil low-level chart on the left and the OS map for the target work. This is pure map, compass, stopwatch work that you will probably know and love and have used. It is the foundation skills. It's really useful because it teaches an understanding of how the wind affects you. It allows us to teach them an appreciation of reading the chart or the map and then relating that to the ground. They also have to learn, therefore, to plan around airspace and avoids and so on. As I said before, they plan to fly at 180 knot ground speed, so they can actually plan these still wind, and then accel to 210, decel to 150 knots to cater for the winds. So plus minus 30 knots of wind. If it's any more than that, then we accept the error. And the other thing about this is it really helps us to challenge them mentally. You know, obviously they've got to do mental dead reckoning, but they've also got to fly, be very involved in the nav work cycle, and this is very useful to determine where we think they should go next. You know, what stream we should send them down. So the nav phase, what we call the applied phase, is very testing, and it's very useful to us as instructors. This makes up about 75% of the courses you saw on the previous slide, and then we let them loose on the kit. They plan on the computer. They still have to produce a paper plan in case the kit fails. The computer could spit out a printout, but we don't want to make it too easy. They upload the kit, the plan to the aircraft using a straightforward USB. And then the techniques are the same, but less. So they don't need to fix. They don't need to do all the preparation arriving at the turn point. They just arrive, rehack the clock, and turn. So there's about 50% of the work to do using the kit. And the SA, situational awareness involved, is obviously much better. They still do MDR, mental dead reckoning, to gross error check the kit. And they still use the stopwatch because that gives them the redundancy. If the kit fails, they can then flip back to their reversionary techniques, but it also drives their domestics. This kit is obviously giving them a countdown to the next waypoint. So that triggers their turn point actions, but the stopwatch triggers triggers what they do domestically with their fuel planning and so on. Target work remains on the 50th hour OS map because this is a civilian system, civilian kit. It doesn't have the mapping to give us the fidelity to find a pinpoint grid. And also they're so new to IP target work that really keeping them on the old-fashioned and known techniques is a good thing at this stage. Interestingly, a lot of them find when they get onto this at the end of the syllabus, they don't like it that much. Actually, they find their situational awareness is diminished because they don't do all of the checks and preparation, wind, mental dead reckoning, and so on that they do without the kit. So I think the problem is they're so inexperienced, they've just got used to reversionary nav, and then we let them loose on the kit, and it's almost too much, too little, too late. I welcome a bit of feedback if you have some on whether you think there's a better way of doing it. We did wonder whether we should do kit first and introduce reversionary second, but I think this is the right way around to do it, but it's how we better introduce it. I haven't figured that one out yet. So the training objectives by the end of the course and the end of the nav syllabus, they have to be able to plan a medium to low level route, and it will have at least one IP to target in it. They have to be able to fly that plan, weather avoid as necessary. Weather avoid is obviously useful for avoiding towns and things, but really they should have planned around that. They have to be able to cross airspace, typically MATSs, so military airspace or Class D. They have to deal with simulated emergencies en route and divert to the nearest as required. And then one of the most testing aspects is the unplanned nav. So at some point in the route, sort of after the target, we will ask them to take us off the plan to somewhere completely different. They will then have a few minutes to formulate a plan with heading, timings, avoids, and so on, fuel planning, and then go to that grid. And that is one of the more testing aspects, but absolutely achievable. They have to do all of this with and without the help of the kit. And for the final nav test, they're given their target 3 hours before takeoff, and they then have to come up with the plan in about 2 hours or less, and then brief it and go and fly it. So, and that's about 55 minutes worth of nav. So quite challenging and a lot of fun for us. That completes my part of the brief. I'm now going to hand you over to my colleague, Squadron Leader Spence Wild, who will continue the theme of contemporary nav training. Spence, over to you.
Thanks, Rod. Just move that on. And thank you. And like Rod said there, I'm Squadron Leader Spence Wild, and I am in charge of mission aircrew training on 45 Squadron at RAF Cranwell. Mission aircrew is the collective term for all non-pilot aircrew roles. You'll see more of that as I go through my brief. I've been in the Air Force for 30 years. My career started on C-130Ks down at Lynham. At the time, it was a 5-man aircrew, and about 12 years later, we saw the introduction of the C-130J and a step change to a reduction in that crew. We lost the navigator and the air engineer, and we moved into the 3-crew realm of aircraft. After getting my commission, I moved on to the TriStar, a 2-man aircrew flight deck, and supported by an air engineer and a loadmaster in the cabin crew. That aircraft has been replaced with a much more advanced aircraft in the A330 that is completing the transport and air-to-air refueling roles. On that aircraft, we have 2 pilots and a mission support systems officer or operator, both of which can be commissioned or non-commissioned, and is made up of former navigators, air engineers, or air loadmasters to do that role. My most recent aircraft was the C-17 Globemaster transporter, and that had a 2-man flight deck of pilots supported by 1 loadmaster. And most recently, we've seen the introduction of the A400M, again, a 3-man crew aircraft. So all in all, the 3-man crew has become the norm. And because of the more complex nature of the flight deck operations, we've seen a step change in the way that mission aircrew are being employed and utilized on the aircraft. And we've had to move and adapt to better prepare them for their operational OCUs. On 45 Squadron, we aim to deliver safe, timely, and world-class training for the RAF's future multi-engine pilots and mission aircrew. That list beneath there are those that I'm responsible for in the delivery of the training. Broken down into the training and how we deliver it then, we expect all the WSOs to come through initial officer training at RAF College Cranwell, and the WSOPs now undertake the direct entry senior NCO course, which is conducted at RAF Halton. When they come to 45 Squadron or into the new UK MFTS training realm, all trades go and join the Military Aviation Ground School, which is known as MAGS at RAF College Cranwell, and I'll cover more of that in a couple of minutes. Breaking down into specifics then for each trade, you'll see that the WSOs undertake a elementary nav training. They then complete the Royal Navy Observers course, which has a flying phase on the Avenger, and also come back to Cranwell to complete the ISR Foundation course. Loadmasters themselves undertake the elementary flying training. This is an introduction into operating in a complex environment, assisting the pilots to understand the systems and engage with them and operate some of the systems. It aligns better with the way that we're employing them, and it gives an introduction to the way they may operate on larger aircraft. There's also an academic and a practical, which includes synthetic and a flying phase for the loadmasters. For the ISR WSOs and WSOPs, they'll undertake a foundation phase and then into an academic synthetic phase, which is more advanced training before undertaking flying phase. On MAGS, or Military Aviation Ground School, the aim of the course is to provide student aircrew with an academic grounding related to the theory, principles, and procedures associated with fixed-wing flying. The course is broken down to those elements that you can see before you, and particularly the aircraft systems, principles of flight, flight planning, communications, and airmanship principles. With this, all aircrew trades undertake the same level of training and the same course, which is over 6 weeks. Moving more specifically then into weapons systems officers and the WSO training there. After completing MAGs, they'll move and deliver or conduct a elementary navigation training. And that is provided by Ascent under the UK MFTS, gaining proficiency in air navigation and low-level navigation. And on one final assessed flight, they'll conduct 5 flights during the time that they're taking this training. The final flight is a full flight assessed trip where they'll put the trip into the mission planning system, load the systems on the aircraft, and then fly that route and recover back to Cranwell. They move then to the Joint Observer Sensors course with the Royal Navy. That's conducted at the Royal Naval Air Station at Culdrose. After completing a 3-week ISR foundation course at Cranwell, they'll be streamed to a specific type and moved on to the ISTAR force. Interestingly, we're now reviewing these courses, and there is a new joint WSOP observers course being developed in conjunction with the Royal Navy, which will go live next year in April of 21. This will replace all the training that you can see above in that list and be one bespoke training serial for weapon systems officers. Moving to more of the back end of the aircraft then, I've got the WSOP ALM training, which is delivered by UK MFTS. It's a more modern and advanced training which is delivered in partnership with Ascent. I have military and civilian instructors who are providing high-level training with with the aid of more modern equipment. In the pictures below that you can see, the student is on the far left there. The student is conducting a air navigation serial in the flight training device and is actually inputting the planned flight into the FMS. It's the first time that they're introduced to the aircraft systems and how utilizing the equipment they can be involved in. In the middle, we've got a full mock-up of the A400M aircraft in a hangar. This is a more realistic training environment for the students to learn the bread and butter of their trade. Over 6 weeks, they will conduct a number of serials where they can load anything from a simple box up to a more complex helicopter, pallets, or complex loads. Finally, at the end of their training serial, they'll undertake 3 flying phases or 3 flights in a Phenom aircraft to give them an understanding of airborne activity. Moving towards the more ISTAR specific trade, the WSOP ISR, and that is delivered by my military instructors because ISR training for the WSOPs has not been brought under UK MFTS yet. That is under review and may do so in time. They've got 2 specific phases that they take. In the first foundation phase, that is there to teach and consolidate the understanding of flight publications, en route supplements, charts and route planning, consolidative comms, procedures, airmanship, situational awareness, and crew cooperation. It's after that phase that they'll be streamed to other specific areas that they're more suited for, either acoustics in the P8 or electronic warfare. They'll then move to the right of that slide there and into the advanced phase and undertake the more acoustic analyst training, advanced EOIR training, and advanced EW theory and practicals in land and maritime environments. All of this is actually conducted on synthetics, as you can see in those pictures below. On this slide, it's a pictorial representation of what I've just explained. And this is specifically set out for the ISTAR specifics students. And on the far right, you've got the officers entering into the IOT at Cranwell and the WSOPs at the bottom coming in through Halton on the direct entry senior NCO course. It shows that they go through MAGs, foundation training, get streamed to specific trades, and then the new course that's being developed with the Navy is 371 course in the middle there at Royal Naval Air Station, Culdrose. They'll move through a flying phase and then all be awarded their flying badges. In summary then, what I found is recent aircraft have created a more complex operating environment We are now providing or preparing mission aircrew for operational units. We provide world-class training through UK MFTS in partnership with Ascent. Mission aircrew are highly skilled operators and integral members of the flight crew, and we're currently developing a new training course with the Royal Navy that will be conducted at the Royal Naval Air Station, Culdrose, from April next year. That concludes my presentation, and Rod will jump back onto the screen and we'll take any questions.